Are you tired of having to repeat yourself to your staff every single time? You keep saying the same thing over and over again, but they keep doing what they want to do. Are you tired of micromanaging your staff because you are anxious that without you doing this, they wouldn't actually do what they're supposed to do? And sometimes, do you feel like you actually have to step in and do the task yourself instead of waiting for your staffs to do it because you feel like you'll be able to do it better? Well, this video will be perfect for you because in this video, we're going to talk about how to train staffs. And I'm going to show you the 5 steps. And our goal here is how we can transform inconsistent employees into reliable team that can actually perform without you having to step in all the time. So before we talk about the 5 steps of our training method, which I call the Performance Replication Method, let's first look at the 2 types of hotel owners that exist. So because the difference here is in their thinking and their thought process and their approach to things. So you have a struggling hotel owner and you have a successful hotel owner. And then let's look at, first of all, how they think and how their reality actually comes across. Right? So a struggling owner typically have to repeat instructions every single day. They are typically the ones who have to carry the whole team because without them, the standards fall. They're the ones holding the standards, and all the problems that they encounter, they have to step in and solve the problem. Typically, what happens here is that they typically have a huge high turnover of staffs because staffs do not like to work where there is no clarity. Now, you have another successful owner, and what happens is that the team carries the bulk of the load. And what that looks like is like the team actually knows what to do. All issues get resolved without even involving the owner. The guests are typically happy because the staffs can actually solve most of all the problems, and the staffs actually feel fulfilled, which typically leads to staffs retention. Now, that leads us to the performance replication method. Now, this is a 5-step framework that you have to have for you to train successful staffs. And for you to be like the successful owner, you have to think in this framework. Now, there's 5 steps. What is the first thing you need to get right? You need to clarify task. What does this mean? If it's not written, it doesn't exist. So before you start training anyone in any role, you should have clearly written down what tasks are involved in that particular role. Now, once you have it written down, that becomes the point of reference, because what you don't want is having 50 staffs doing one task 50 different ways. It creates inconsistency. And typically that's how you cause a lot of problems for you. So for example, if you are a hotel and you have 50 staffs doing one task 50 different ways, you get different outcomes. It leads to poor review because one person does it perfectly right today, and the next day somebody does it terrible. So this whole point here is to serve as a point of reference. Think of it like a syllabus for that particular job or that particular role. That's what clarity is. Now, the next step is where we demonstrate. Now, people don't just learn by reading, they also learn by watching. So this is where I recommend where you need to have, you need to demonstrate what the actual task is. That could be either having a video recording of how to actually execute that particular task, right? Or so you have somebody who shadows the trainee and teach them exactly how things to be done, because they need to see it so it becomes real. Right? So that's very important. And in this part, this is where you begin to share your understanding in that particular role, because there's some things that you do that might not make sense to a new employee. And because it doesn't make sense, you would find that they would tend to ignore or skip that particular task because they don't understand why you're doing that particular role, or they may not understand the importance. Take, for example, if you're in a hotel and you understand, you, the owner, understand that collecting emails, customer data, is important because on the back end, you can resell and you understand the LTV, the lifetime value of a customer. You know how much that brings in to your business if you have a way of contacting a customer. So you can understand that. So you understand why that's important. which is why you always collect emails at the check-in process. So now, if you are teaching a new staff and you don't explain the understanding behind why we're collecting emails, they might just see that step as inconsequential, and they can just skip that step, right? So there are certain things that are nuanced that you have understanding why you're doing them, but to somebody else or new staff, they may not think it's important and they may skip that process. So step number 3 is rehearse. This is where you repeat until it's predictable. Now, a lot of hotel owners would look at me and say, well, they're doing the task every single day. Why do we have to rehearse? Well, the difference is you need to understand the difference between repetition and rehearsing. Repetition is just simply doing the same thing over and over and over again. It doesn't matter whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, or if they're doing the wrong thing, they become masters at being wrong. What you want to do is practice the correct way, the correct thing, repeated over time. That's what you mean by rehearsing. Now, in this step, this is where you build the confidence in the staff, the new staff. Because one thing you don't understand is that when new staffs come into an organization, they feel very insecure because they don't know if this is the right fit for them, if they're going to be good at the job. Is this the place for them? Now, this is where you have to build that confidence. You have to give feedback when they're doing things right so that they know that this is the right place for them and they can actually execute it, and you build the confidence. Because the worst thing you do, because there's an example of, there's a hotel where they hired a manager and they basically hired her and just threw her to the wolves, assuming, well, she had experience from previous hotel, I guess she can figure it out herself. Now, what happened is that she began to feel very insecure at her role. Whenever there was questions, and she was a manager, and whenever there were questions from the lower level staffs asking her how do they do certain things, she could not provide those answers. She felt very inadequate in the role, and shortly after she quit. And she was a phenomenal staff. But that's what you need to understand, why this step is important. You cannot hire staff and just simply forget about them or just hope they figure it out. No. This is very important. You must build the confidence by rehearsing the correct way. Step number 4 is reinforce. And this is where we keep standards from drifting. Now, the natural tendency for anything in life is the law of entropy, meaning that if it's left to itself, it tends towards decay. Now, you could have all of these steps right, but things are naturally going to start decaying, and people will start reverting to their old ways. They start going back to keep making the same mistakes, things like that. So you have to install guardrails so that when things start to drift, you are making touch points on a frequent basis so that they maintain the standards. Now, how we do things like this? What you want to do is you could have weekly touch points where you correct bad habits. If you notice something is going wrong, you fix it and you correct and you give them feedback. You can pick a particular process and teach the whole team on it as a reminder. Things like this is what you want to do. And also, if you find there's certain processes that people are consistent on, you also want to reward consistent people, right? So it's not about just always pointing out mistakes, but also celebrating what is going on great. Now, step number 5 is verify. And this is where you hold staffs accountable. And this is one of the most important steps. And I feel like a lot of hotel owners skip this particular part. Now, what this simply means is that, let me give you an example. So when you look at the speed limit, there's a reason why they invented the speed radar so that they can track whether someone's going past the speed limit, instead of having a bunch of police officers on the road tracking every single person. It's just inefficient, too much bottleneck, and this is not really the most effective way of doing it. What you do is install guardrails, and whenever somebody goes past that particular number, which is maybe 50, for example, then triggers alert. That person gets punished by sending them a ticket, right? So you have guardrails. So you're not watching every single car that passes or drives on the road. You're just looking for the ones that break the limit. So that's the same kind of logic you have to apply to all of this. If your staffs are no longer doing what they're supposed to do, you're supposed to have an alert that triggers, because you have a benchmark. And if it goes past that, you are alerted and you know that you need to go back and revisit training. Take, for example, now, if we pick a certain KPI, for example, let's say reviews. If our reviews out of 5 for housekeeping, we're getting 2 or 3. What does that tell us? We need to go back to revisit our training for housekeeping. Now, we have to figure out, okay, all right, were we clear enough? Do we have a written training of how things are supposed to be? Do we have clear SOPs? Did we communicate it clearly to that particular staff or those staffs? Did we demonstrate it to them? Did we actually shadow and show them exactly what success looks like? Step 3, did we practice with them the correct way? Right? We have to ask ourselves that. Do we do regular touch points? Because this keeps being an issue. Do we make this a regular point to talk about in our weekly meetings or weekly coaching sessions or monthly coaching sessions, whatever? Are we doing that? Is there a way for them to go and search the library on how to do that particular task properly? That's what this is, where we hold them accountable. It ties all of this together. I hope that's clear. So if you do this, what you end up having is being like the successful hotel owner, because now your team knows exactly what to do very clearly. Issues and problems get resolved because, first of all, you've already shown them exactly how to handle most of these problems. You've demonstrated them how to do it, and you've rehearsed with them on how to do those tasks. You have happy guests because your staffs are delivering consistent outcomes every single time, right? And staffs feel very fulfilled because they all know what success looks like to them. And this answers all the 3 questions that you might have been having to yourself. You're thinking, why does my staff not listen? Well, it could be that you are not clear enough. If you're having a question, why do they keep doing things their own way instead of doing the way that I've showed them? Well, go back to step 2 and step 3. Demonstrate and rehearse with them. Step number 3, it's better for you to do it yourself because they are inconsistent. And if you follow all of these 5 steps, you'd have things being consistent. That's the solution to this questions. I hope that helped.